Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Future Space. I'm your host, Daniel Fox. Our guest today is Christopher Stott. Chris is the founder, chair, and CEO of Lonestar Data Holdings, the lunar information technology and communication company. He's also the founder and executive chairman of ManSat, the world's largest commercial provider of satellite spectrum. Chris, welcome to the future of space.
Well, Daniel, thank you very much for having me. Hello, everybody, and really looking forward to this.
I'm looking forward for this space conversation with you. But before we get to your journey and what you're doing right now, Lunar Lone Star, can you share with us three words that for you capture the essence of space?
Vital, inspiring, and gosh, that third one is it's needs to get done. If you could find a word in the thesaurus for me for that, it would be most appreciated.
Excellent. We'll look it up in a dictionary. By the time that I push this out, I'm going to try to come up with something. Now, there's a science story of going to space. There's a technology story of going to space. But for you, what do you think is the human story of going to space?
While it's as a species, short-lived in this world of ours, in comparison to all that's gone before us. While it's the ultimate definition of whether we survive or not, it's our choice to survive. It's our choice to have a better future or not. As Larry Niven said and says, the dinosaurs became extinct because they didn't have a space program. It really is our destiny. Space holds the key and the answer to everything we need as a species, every problem we are facing right now. And by the way, one of the greatest problems we are facing is a sincere, I would suggest, lack of destiny, basically. We've just come through the Cold War. We're heading into the second very disturbing Cold War. We've got climate change ahead of us, which we will solve. Of course we will. And it's that shared goal, that shared idea of a positive future that you find coming out of science fiction. So when you want to look at what is in this for humanity, we can talk about the science, and we will, and we'll talk about the tech, and we will. We'll talk about the access to new resources and energy, which is absolutely vital for us as a species. But we'll also talk about that sense of purpose, of a purpose-driven life, of a massive transformational purpose, not just for individuals, but for us as a society and as a species. Space gives us that.
Do you think that tension, those challenges that are presented to us, is a necessary ingredient to push the boundaries? If we didn't have that stress imposed on us, do you think that we would kind of be settled or content with just staying where we are? In fact, nature, do you think that nature has created that foundation of evolution by always making sure that the species are trying to figure out how to evolve and adapt rather than kind of the status quo? What do you think?
Absolutely. It's built in us. We are competitive beings by our very nature. Notice it's called the human race, not the humans sit down and watch everyone else do things. It's the human race, as in a race, not just as in a people, but we're incredibly competitive. Everything we do in our lives is competitive. We're driven by this evolutionary imperative to find better things and to find, better food, better water, a better place to live. And everything we've done competitively, sadly, every conflict we've ever had in human history is based on competition over raw materials or land, whether it's from Lebensraum or the word river and the word rival having the same derivation. We compete with each other. Sometimes we compete with nature. But I still think, it's, you can't really look up into the sky. Our Lord put those stars up there and that moon there for a reason. It is quite inspiring, and it has inspired us and our ancestors ever since it has been the written word.
Do you think like life is a race? I mean, obviously we bring this race back to us
Sure.
because, it's relevant to us. But if we look at all other species, just from nature's or from the planet's perspective, ever since from the single cells to where we are today, and I always say that from the perspective of the planet, life has been waiting for this moment for 4.6 billion years where it can jump to another planet and assure the continuation of its investment of life. Because obviously, why would you invest so much to be limited to this one, one little planet in the scale of the universe? It wants to connect on a universal level in the same way that it's been connecting and evolving on Earth. So really, life, this competition is actually built within the foundation of life, and we're just the medium, or we embody really the greatness of this adaptability of life. What do you think?
No, absolutely. No, you may raise an interesting point. I mean, we are the first, especially if you look at that form of evolution. There we are, the human race. And as far as we know and understand, though I've got my eye on dogs because they know right from wrong. Trust me, and they know they've been caught doing something. Love dogs. But look, we're the only beings that we know of. We're the only variable in the equation for the entire universe that we know of. Right? We're the only beings that have this innate sense of right and wrong, and we make choices. We're not driven by instinct. Unlike dolphins or squirrels, we're not putting nuts away for the winter. We're not migrating like birds. We're not. And everything in nature is wondrous and incredible and needs preserving and needs protecting, but change is the only constant there too. And so that comes down to us as a species. Yeah, we're the first species that we know of that can actually take a step back and look at the universe and examine the universe and discuss the universe and think about what is our place in this universe and what can we do? What choices can we make? And Jerry Pournelle wrote a fantastic book called A Step Farther Out in 1979. It was the seminal work on space economics. It's the driving work behind our work at the Institute of Space Commerce. We're actually getting ready to republish that this year, and a new edition with some of his more recent work. He sadly passed. He was our patron. Larry Niven, his writing partner and great friend, is our patron now too. And it was all about the equation, that Malthusian equation. You go look at the Club of Rome, and they've been saying since the mid-70s, that we're all doomed. It's very much, a perceived perception, isn't it, of reality? Oh no, we're all going to starve to death. There's going to be too many people. Oh, we're going to have a war. Oh my gosh, let's just give up, really. Let's not do anything. Oh my gosh, slap, slap, slap. No, we are made of stardust. Holy crap, look at the universe. My goodness, get a grip, people. We can have a much better future through the application of science and technology to solve this equation. Change the equation, right? And space does that for us as a species. If we don't go to space, then yes, we're going to be gone in 1 or 2 generations, and we deserve to be if we don't do this. Space gives us this unique ability, not just to get the overview effect of seeing how beautiful our planet is, looking back from orbit, but to have access to resource and energy that we need as a species to buy us more time to evolve, but also to appreciate who we are, where we are, to diffuse this Malthusian bomb that's about to go off. And it's our choice to do so. And we can do so. We're coming to that rapid time in human history where you've got these 2 very large competing groups of thought. On one side, you have Republican democracy. Republican with a small r, not a political r. And, for those who don't know that, go look it up. It's fascinating. Popping out of ancient Greece and popping back up again with the American Revolution of 1776 and going on from there. And on the other side, we have a whole bunch of tyrannies, literal dictatorships, who really don't give a crap about human rights or human beings. So on one side, you have light and enlightenment, and the other side, darkness and tyranny. And the thing that pulls us ahead is space. It gives us the ultimate high ground, and it gives us that ultimate view, that long-term view. I was just watching a couple of documentaries over the weekend, and they were talking about the Voyager probes. And, we know about the Voyager probes. But think of the long-term view that scientists and the politicians and the people who funded it, built it, launched it, and the people still working there have. They were working on something that fundamentally goes beyond their own lifetimes, not just their careers, their lifetimes, and keeps contributing to the human race. Who's ever done that in human history? Oh, that's right, free peoples. And that's where we are too with space. So that it's competitive, yes. We're unique. Alan Bean used to give this fantastic talk. Alan Bean, Apollo 12 moonwalker, flew on Skylab, an amazing artist. He gave this great talk where he talked about the universe being a clock, that you could, fast forward, pause it, fast forward it, reverse it, see the position of the planets and where they are and the stars and where they are, and it tells you the time of the entire universe. And that in all of that, the only variable that we know of is us as human beings. The only variable. And that really starts to get you thinking about our place in the universe and what we can achieve if we wish to do so. Sorry, I can go on for hours on this stuff, Daniel.
No, absolutely not. Like, I get goosebumps because it's exactly the same language. I mean, we're the only species who've been able to take nature, the randomness and the chaos of nature, and go beyond it, right? Nature has given us two legs. Well, no one really travels the world in two legs anymore. Nature didn't give us the clothes, but we've come up with clothes, and obviously at the benefit for our own benefit. Nature didn't give us a roof over our heads. We've built those roof over our heads so that we could get above that chaos and randomness of nature. We used to be, nomads and being forced to move with the change, moving with the seasons, moving with the food, and always kind of adapting to that change until the point where we start to become settlers and build a certain stability. You need that stability so that you can build on top of it. Now, after that, when people go and say, "Oh, I want to go back to that lifestyle," where that is just a question of perspective. You certainly don't want to go back to a place where you go back to that chaos and randomness. No one wants to be born naked and then suddenly just be at the mercy of everything. You want to be building on top of that. And we would not be going to space had we not been able to step up. So that's, for me, this is one of the arguments that I've often had with the environmental movement, is that they created a story about the human species that is so non-inspiring, so negative, that other than the ones, who resonate with that kind of narrative, but for the ones who are trying to feed their family, put food on the table, send their kids to, like, no one is waking up in the morning trying to do the bad thing for the planet. Everybody's trying to do the right thing, but we have all our priorities. And I think that the beauty of the human species is that we rise in the worst of times when we think of, like, oh, there's no tomorrow. This is the moment where suddenly we come together. I mean, just look at the James Webb Telescope. How many countries came together for this vision of a telescope going in orbit into this place that we've never been to? It's a conceptual. I mean, we found it through math, but we've never been there. We had to believe in this thing that was possible, invest the time and energy and money on this vision that couldn't be proven real until we do it. And now it's there. It's everything worked out exactly perfectly. I mean, having the satellite on top of a rocket go through, unfolding like an origami style, and then travel. It is just, I mean, if someone cannot get excited about this, I mean, might as well just stay home. So, totally agree. I mean, I think, you could go on, I could go on, we could go on about how I think that we're in love with the human story. It's a messy story, but there's a beauty to it. And I think that we need to remind ourselves that, right?
Oh, absolutely. Well, we're living in a golden age. We're living in the middle of the second renaissance, this digital renaissance. And there's a bunch of economic shockwaves coming through, just like there was on the first renaissance with the printing press. Now we have a digital printing press. And we're feeling that. Okay, it's in our economies right now, and we're coming off a global pandemic. Sadly, not the last one. And we now have a war in Europe again, created by tyranny. And so it's the more things change, the more they stay the same. But from chaos comes opportunity. And those new technologies, those phoenix rising from the ashes, are here with us right now. William Gibson said, the future's already with us. It's just unevenly distributed, right? And it's here right now. And space is part of that. I mean, if we, it's one of those things in hindsight, we would look back and say, oh my gosh, years from now, well, of course, everything was going to be fine because it was all there. And it's like, no, we're still working really hard to do this. I mean, we've only had a space industry since the 1950s, since arguably 54, 57, right, coming out of World War II. And so we're talking, 60 years, 60-something years-ish, 65 years? That's really not that long. And yet we're all so impatient. And that's one of the things I love about us as a species, because spaceflight is the first time you could say quite accurately that life imitates art. Arthur C. Clarke said that the spaceflight was the most written about event in human history before it happened. Right? And we're all so eager to get this done because we know of the promise. We know what we can achieve for our fellow humans. And we're at that point of, I hope we're at that point of realizing, look, there's so much we can do here. So much is changing. It's changing around us. So many, like you said, about the James Webb, so few people sadly know about that. We know about it because we're interested in it, but there's so many things happening at such an increasingly fast pace. There's so much technological change going on. And the benefits of that are coming down to us in so many different ways that people just aren't aware. And they should be happy. And you're right. Environmentalism came out of it. A lot of it came out of that 1968 image of the Earth from the moon, as the Apollo astronauts said that we went to the moon to discover the Earth, or as Nicole says in her book, right, Back to Earth. As Nikki said, for too long we've been passengers. We now have to start thinking about being crew, and realizing that we're on a spaceship. It's just traveling at 1,000 miles, spinning at 1,000 miles an hour, traveling around the sun, and the sun traveling around its part of the Milky Way. And we need to maybe start taking a lot better care of it. But for the first time, if you can't measure it, you can't change it. And so there we are now with remote sensing satellites, synthetic aperture radar satellites, 24-hour coverage of the planet, from GEO down to LEO and MEO. We can actually start to measure and change now. So we've given ourselves the tools to affect change. And that's one of the reasons why I know we will solve climate change. Now, if you leave it to all the doomsayers, no, we won't. But the same doomsayers have been sitting there throughout history there are a lot of very professionally negative people around the world. It's easy to say something negative. It's really hard to say something positive and then make it happen. But that's space, people. We have this incredible backstop of the human journey, of this vision of what we can achieve, written in some of the most, some of the most, what's the nicest word for this? It is, science fiction is banned in some countries still because it is seen as quite threatening to political elites, because it really, really is. I've just come off of COVID, and I'm sure I'm suffering something here because this is one word, and it's not subjective, it's subversive. Thank you. See, it takes me a second. It's subversive literature. And why? Because it shows us a better future. It pans out those very human elements of politics, economics, and technology, and lets us see the consequences. Lets us play around with the consequences, and lets us anticipate a better future. So we were talking to, I had a great position to talk to a school the other day about some spaceflight stuff. And we were out in Los Angeles, and I'm sorry we didn't get to see you. We were out doing some stuff with the X Prize, and we were chatting to some of the students that were coming through. And it was something that Peter Diamandis said at an event. And I've been fortunate. I've known Peter for over 30 years. He's an amazing gentleman, an incredible visionary. And he said something that shocked me, really shocked me. And it took me a couple of weeks to figure out what he said. And so we were at an event, and there were two actors from Star Trek there, Brent Spiner and George Takei, and there was Rod Roddenberry, the son of the founder, who's now very much working to get this keep the franchise going and do these great things. And Peter said, they said, "Oh, what do you think of Star Trek?" And Peter said, "I think that's the greatest documentary about the future I've ever seen." And I was like, "What?" And so I played it back in my mind. Peter said, "Star Trek is the greatest documentary about the future I'd ever seen." And I was like, "Oh, ha, Peter. Okay, very, very funny." That's great. Yes. But no, the more I thought about it, look, because like in martial arts, you do a lot of positive mental imaging. You are going to, you're going to make that kick. You are going to complete the kata. You're going to, you're going to punch through that wooden block, right? Positive mental image, massive transformational purpose. And the more I thought about it, the more I was like, well, wait a minute. There we are as a species. We have given ourselves an aiming point of a positive future where everyone is equal, where we've solved a lot of these climate issues, where we've solved economics, where we've solved want, poverty, need, education. And I was like, oh my gosh. And it was written by some of the very best writers in human history. And I'm like, Peter's right. He is so very right. And look, everyone watching this, think that I am crazy. Go check this out for yourselves. Go sit and meditate on this. What future do you want for the human race? A Blade Runner future? A Terminator future? Or a Star Trek future? Really? Think it. And you think, well, who do I have to be? Who do you need to be to think about your future of your species on your planet? You don't leave this to politicians who don't have this vision. You provide them with the vision. You get involved. You get involved locally, globally, and act upon it. And get involved in the space industry, the environmental movements, the economics, every single facet of what we're doing, and make a better future. Because you can. Who do you have to be? You is all you have to be. You are made of stars. You are the most incredible thing in the entire history of the universe. There's never been another you. Even identical twins aren't. Right? And this is your moment in history for you to have an impact on the rest of human history. You are at that bow wave, that quantum bow wave of temporal possibilities right now. And your choice, your thoughts, your words, your deeds, your actions decide everything that goes forward for the rest of human history. And you can choose to have that positive vision. Don't leave it to others. Get involved, and you will be amazed at the positive impact you can have. And welcome to the space industry.
Exactly. It's so I just came back from DC. I was there for the Explore Mars Summit and then the NSS. And then my wife had the brilliant idea to go and visit the National Archives, which they had never seen. And I didn't expect it to be such a powerful experience because you get to understand the vision and the effort and the work and what it represented, this new continent. We can go into, some other debates of like who went there first, but that's besides the point. The point is that Europe had reached, I guess, its limitations, and North America represented that new land of opportunity where these visionaries of Europe could use that and bring their value and build something that would really kind of elevate the future. Now this is what space is, right? It's that new land of opportunity where, okay, our world, America, has reached a certain place of evolution, certain limits. I think we're reaching the limit, but that new land of opportunity is allowing us to shape that vision, to create how do we want to move forward. It's not going to be easy. It's not because you have a vision and then suddenly things happen, automatically. But by going over there with that beacon, with that line of direction, it allows us to kind of move towards that. And that's, for me, this is one of the things that is so exciting about space. And exactly what you were just saying is we're able now to make this happen. We are building it. We're bringing those values. We have people that are investing, and we're talking about the overview effect as if like this is an important. We need to take world leaders to see it, to get that sense of perspective. Because when you're down on the ground, it's always hard to get that physicality of that experience because it's conceptual. But once you're up there and you get to experience it and you get to see the planet in context of William Shatner really like expressing that contrast, the blackness, death and the void. And here you are, the earth. And, Nicole, your wife, talks about that thin blue line, everything that just like all our stories happened on that little planet. It gives you a sense of perspective, but it also gives you a sense of empowerment of how far we've come and where we're going. And we need to reach that impossible milestone. You were saying something earlier about how things are moving fast now, and a lot of people actually focus on that. Things are moving too fast. Like it's what I often say about that is that when you're young and you try to climb a hill, it demands all your energy to climb that little hill, and it takes time because that's how much you can do. And if you do fall from that hill, it's not that big of a fall. It's just you kind of roll down. But the stronger you get, the bigger the mountain. But the bigger the mountain, also the bigger the fall. But your capacity to deal with that fall also increases at the same time of the risk. So yes, as a society, we are getting better at inventing, innovating and all this. But the capacity that we have with negotiating with that pace or with the complexity also elevates. So yes, things are changing fast, but our capacity to deal with that speed also increases. So for me, I'm not bummed by that speed of change because we're developing also as fast as that change. I mean, would you agree with that?
Absolutely. I mean, don't forget, we have to go as fast as we humanly can, and then as fast as the machines can help us go. This is, we are on a clock. The human race, our survival is not a given unless we act. And, I think that with the overview affecting the politicians, it would be great for them to see that. And if they don't get it, change them. That's one of those things where we live in representative democracies. If they're not working, change them through the democratic process. Go and see young politicians and talk to them about space and the overview effect. And just this incredible change it is bringing in the astronauts and cosmonauts and taikonauts themselves. I mean, there we are, and here we are in a terrible point in human history, yet another one. Was as Jerry Pournelle says, how do you know there's something called peace, where you measure the gaps in between wars? And yet, up on the space station, we have Americans and Russians and Europeans and Japanese living and working together. I always like to point out, don't forget that Russia and Japan never actually technically made peace after World War II. Space has this ability to bridge that gap and help people think audaciously. Space is where we're settling. We're not colonizing. This is the new beginning. We're not having to displace people. And by the way, you mentioned going to the National Archives, and I recommend everyone do that. It's an incredible thing to go see those words written down, and to imagine sitting in a room with candlelight and people sitting there debating, thinking of those words. And you mentioned something really important, Daniel. You talked about the original inhabitants here, of course. And the more you go back and you look at Hobbes and Rousseau especially, and you go back and you look into the writings of the time, and you find that a lot of that was impacted by Native American thought on democracy and how society should live and how people should live and work together. And a lot of what Rousseau and the others were writing was a reaction to that thought, of those new ideas mixing with ours, which gave birth to a lot of the thought behind the American Revolution. And I know that's quite something to say, but I at least have a degree in this stuff, and go back and check it out. Don't forget, everything you're taught about at high school is wrong. Everything you're taught about at your bachelor's degree is normally wrong. It's normally until you get to the master's or PhD level that they start ferreting out the truth, and you're like, oh my gosh, right? History's never quite what you thought it was, but the future can be what you want it to be. Be audacious. Be as audacious as the people who wrote that Declaration of Independence, right? I mean, it's a constant conversation with America, a constant conversation with itself. We're constantly reinventing ourselves. That's a normal thing for us. But space has given us something really unique. It gives us something that is more than us. It gives us the ability to positively impact every man, woman, and child today and every day going forward for the future, the foreseeable future of humanity. I mean, this is the ability to get in. Stanley Kubrick said there was a glow around people from the space industry. I got that from his daughter, and chatting with her, and she said, no, he wants to talk about this glow. And it was the fact that it's the first time he'd ever met anyone who had this incredible sense of purpose. And sometimes I think that's what the human race is lacking. It's certainly what the military-industrial complex is lacking. It's there, but it's tying it all together. We're about to come out with a paper on that at the Institute of Space Commerce. It's, the idea that space pulls us together in a positive way, not just as a nation, but as a people, as a species, where for the first time we can think beyond these petty squabbles that we have. Even today, look, we see what's happening, and I hate to mention Ukraine, but we look at what's going on there, and it's like, oh my gosh, it's just a bunch of, I was going to say it's a bunch of boomers, but that would make me ageist, wouldn't it? And I would just kind of say, like, oh my gosh, can you people not get over the past? Jeffrey Mamba from Nanoracks and now with Voyager once said we shouldn't be haunted by the ghosts of the past, and he's quite right. So often we think, I mean, sometimes that competition in humanity comes out the wrong way. We think about tribes, people in playgrounds, children in playgrounds, teams of people or gangs of people. And that resonates in our politics, and it resonates in international affairs. And yet, for the first time in human history, unless we create a famine, as Peter Diamandis and Stephen Kotler talk about in Bold, we are at the first point in human history where we can feed every man, woman, and child on this planet, where the only famines are politically created. We're at the only time we can educate everybody. Oh my gosh, look at that. We can get a global virus licked, and we can actually, get a vaccine out to pretty much everybody, and we're working hard to get it to everyone who needs it, right? I mean, the technological things we can do as a species, and if you think about, we've only been around, 200,000 years, maybe? And then we had a couple of ice ages that really threw wrenches into the works, like big time. We're only on our first, our own post-glacial period now is when we had to pretty much start from fresh and come back up again. And look at where we've come in the last 100 years, and look at where we're going. And space is the very embodiment of that. It is probably the only guilt-free thing that we do, because it can impact food, security, fresh water, resources, management of resources, managing climate change, stopping pollution, stopping human rights abuses. I mean, all of a sudden, the human race is accountable for the first time. And that comes through some satellite communications, remote sensing, and more. We're finally getting the tools to start affecting change. And how we take that forward is just huge. And I think you see that in some of the superpower rivalries at the moment. Because those in Russia and China are not stupid people. They're our fellow humans. They're really quite smart. But they see it too. They see the onrush of change. And it scares them. And it frightens them. So they're all about control. They're not about open source. They're not about giving every man, woman, and child the ability to reach their full potential. It terrifies some people, and it shouldn't. Oh my goodness gracious me, it should not. So Geeks Without Frontiers, we're involved with the N50 project. That's getting the internet and broadband to the next 50% of the population of our world who doesn't have it. Because there are too many young Einsteins and Marie Curies and everyone out there in Africa and Southeast Asia and South and Central America and parts of Europe, even parts of our own continent here in North America, who don't have access to broadband. Because with broadband comes opportunity, comes education, comes knowledge, comes those self-organized learning environments. Siddhartha Mehta from the TED Prize in 2013, go check that out. It is a whole new way of living as a species. And we're just at the verge. Oh my gosh, we've got fusion, finally, coming around. Finally. We've got, better fission with saltwater and salt reactors. We're finally getting the energy we need as a species. We're finally getting around to the fact to stop burning bloody oil and coal. I mean, come on. I mean, it was bad enough when we were burning whales, right? I mean, come on, can we please, just as a generation, move beyond this, please? The Shah of Iran said that oil is way too precious to burn, right? And it's just that change. We have it. It's all here. Just like the Romans had aluminum, and they had electricity. The Victorians had computing with Babbage and Lovelace and software. And oh my gosh, 200 years ago, digital computers were there. And we just didn't understand them. We didn't leverage them or utilize them. So it drives me crazy sometimes to think, what is sitting in a lab in Silicon Valley right now that people in the future will go, oh my gosh, well, of course you had that. You just didn't use it. You guys were so behind the times. And we're like, no, We really want those things. Want them now, right? And yet here we are. That people are finally going back to the moon. Finally going back to the moon. That felt like the longest 50 years on record, right? We got to the moon, and then think of it as a promised land. Tonight, go out and look at that moon and just realize what it represents in terms of inspiration for math, all the way through to a fully stocked, fully loaded space station around Earth with every raw material and resource we could ever need. And beyond that, the solar system. And we're finally going back. We talk about being the new Israelites. If you go back to the Bible and you look at the book of Exodus, and there was Moses leading the people, leading the Jewish people out of Egypt. And God said to them, "Here we go. Here's the promised land." And they're like, "Oh, it's full of Canaanites." And he goes, "Right, you lot." Very Monty Python. He's like, "Right, you lot, into the wilderness, 40 years. Off you go, you ungrateful bastards. Off you go." And they spent 40 years in the wilderness. And finally, a whole generation had to shift. And they came back and said, "Yeah, that promised land, it's actually kind of nice. Could we please go there?" And I feel that way about us. There's an entire generation. There's a great documentary called Orphans of Apollo, done by Michael Pott. It's fantastic. It's about this whole generation. It talks about the privatization of the Mir space station. But this concept of, we were there. We had the promised land. Oh my gosh. Who stopped? Why did you stop? You idiots. What were you doing? They went back to the professional negatives, the naysayers, the people who didn't have that vision, the people who couldn't see beyond the end of their own noses. And they did incredible work. I mean, and the people in the space industry had to adapt. We did incredible things. The shuttle, station program, and everything else has built that platform for us to finally get back, going back to von Braun's original vision. And we're there now, finally, to get back to the moon. I mean, the Chinese have been active now for 1,236 days in the South Lunar Pole with their rovers. Unmanned, uncrewed rovers. And, we're getting ready to go back this year. It's the 50th anniversary of Apollo 17, and it looks like the NASA CLIPS program, we've got at least one, if not two, providers heading back this year. Finally, getting back to Earth's largest satellite and using it for something really good, and using it for a way that just makes it part of Earth's natural economic sphere. It's Earth's largest satellite. Satellite communications is $440 billion a year business. And we're just going to go start using the biggest one out there that we can all see every night. Sorry, Daniel. Like I said, I can just go and go sometimes. I don't get to talk much. It's just me and the dogs sometimes at home, and my poor team. And I see them briefly on video calls.
I
need to get this stuff out of me sometimes.
You have to. I'm just saying, it's like all coming in, like bubbling up. I was talking often. I ask the question to people. I personally look forward the day that I can look up, and obviously not on the full moon because it would be hard, but like on the new moon when it's in the shadow, to see actual light from human settlement on the moon. I mean, I hope that I will get to live that day, because it will be the first time. I mean, yes, the space station is up there, but unless you know exactly what you're looking for and you have a telescope, you can't see that. When we have human settlement on the moon and there's lights or there's whatever it is, and we can actually see it with our own eyes, it's going to be the first time that we can connect. We can see visually something where humans have another presence. And I'm looking forward for that. I'm looking forward to have this reminder that not too long ago, we were just trying to figure out how to fly. And now we've gone beyond. And I think, earlier you're talking about all the challenges and the tragedies that we go through. We recognize the importance of failure when it comes to entrepreneurs or innovation. The problem or the realities is that failures are also important in personal development and cultural development and societal development. Because otherwise we would be extremely arrogant, and I think not good people, if things always work the way that we thought that they would work. It's actually when we feel these boundaries that it forces us to reassess how we want to move forward, right? I mean, the United Nations would not exist had it not been for the Second World War, and a lot of things that the U.S. would build on would not happen had it not been for the problems that was happening in Europe. Like, so, I have this theory: the why is it that in Europe, or for immigrant cultures, food is so important. The ritual of food, coming around the table and sharing bread and with the community. Why? Because they have an ancestry, they have a history of tragedies and human suffering together. And when all the things that you took for granted are taken away from you, what are you left with? You're left with community and bread. And if you can gather around the table and share bread in the worst of times, then you're reminded that there's hope. And I think that this is, and then after that, once you go through that, you create these rituals that remind you of the necessity of what's important. So the U.S. is a kind of, we're like the new kids on the block in terms of culture. You know, we're that teenager that believed that the world is black and white. We haven't suffered much. Now we're starting to experience a little bit of harshness. But I think that these moments of reflection, these moments when, like, okay, I mean, look at how the world came together. Even Switzerland jumped into the wagon, you know, with against sanctions against Russia. I mean, who would have thought that Switzerland would actually take a position when it has a history of being like, no, we're not going to make anything, you know, we're not going to commit to anything. The world came together. Big corporations came together to say, no, we're not going to do that. And for me, there's a beauty to that. It's messy. Life is messy. Learning is messy. We talk often about how, you know, we have the capacity to become our own butterflies, but we forget how that caterpillar becomes that butterfly. It goes through a transformation. It isolates itself and where it's going to melt and really unbecome what it was so that it can become what it wants to be. And what I often say to people is that, but don't get too excited, because even when the butterfly is out, it still faces other predators that can come and snatch that butterfly and then, you know, and make it its own meal. They're birds and all. So becoming that butterfly doesn't mean that then suddenly you don't have any trouble. It just means that now you have a capacity to fly when you were before just crawling on the ground. Now, Chris, we've been having an amazing conversation for almost 40 minutes, and we haven't even talked about what you do now. Um, and I want you to share briefly also with Space Geek. So, like, with 5-7 minutes, what is Lone Star, and what is Space Geek? The organizations that you also co-founded.
Oh, no, well, thank you very much. Well, Lone Star Data Holdings. Think of Lone Star as that, you know, that Star of David, that Star of Bethlehem, that shining star, that shining city on a hill. We want to show what American entrepreneurship can do for the rest of the world. Our goal is to put a series of data centers up on the lunar surface, leveraging Earth's largest satellite for satellite communications, but looking at a terrestrial market, secure storage, smart storage, disaster recovery as a service. It's a global $200 billion market. And as everyone else goes out to explore the moon, and please do so, it's so cool, it's very exciting to watch all that happen, we're just using the same missions and the same technology and drawing upon satellite communications and merging those cloud verticals with satellite to actually provide a service with customers, paying customers, which is wonderful, leveraging Earth's largest satellite, its stability, its distance, to provide this service down to the entire planet. Think of us like Men in Black meets Swiss bankers. Think of us as the world's first data bank, but living, breathing data. Not so much archival, smart storage as a service, disaster recovery as a service, and then as a platform for edge processing as well. So that's the ultimate edge. We're working with various customers there, doing various other tasks in compute on the edge. Because we live in a software-defined future. It's a software-defined world. And the moon, in my mind, I just see it clearly, is just linked by all these gold and silver threads of data backwards and forwards already. And that'll just grow. It is the perfect location for us to store our data just as things start to get bad before they'll get better in the biosphere, right? When as a technological society, our most important outside of our people and ourselves, our most important asset is our data, more so every day. I was just seeing something this morning. Today is the 1st of June, 2022. I was seeing something this morning where they were talking about the poor Ukrainians have faced over 14 million cyber attacks this year alone. That's nation state action, it's cyber attacks, it's fire, flash, flood, war. We lose data all the time, and that data is becoming more and more irreplaceable on a day-to-day basis. I'm not just talking like Library of Alexandria stuff, we're talking like real day-to-day operations for governments, mission-critical data, premium data. And that's what we're doing at Lonestar. Our first 2 missions are booked, we're flying with intuitive machines. Our proof of concept data center is just past critical design review, CDR. It's being built for us by SkyCorp up in Santa Clara, California. And that should hopefully be on the moon pretty much this time next year, depending on launch dates and a few other things. But yeah, so that's what we're doing at Lone Star. I've got a great team of people around me. Don't forget the number one rule in life. If you walk into a room in the space industry and you're the smartest person there, you have failed. You have fundamentally failed, right? Because the space industry is full of so many smart people. You surround yourselves with a very eclectic team. IDIC, infinite diversity, infinite combination, right? The old Roddenberry quote. That's our motto. E pluribus unum from Meniclum 1 is our motto at Lone Star. But our working ethic is IDIC, because it's surround yourself with incredible people, tell them the problem, and then delegate, make sure they have all the tools they need, and get out of their way and let them achieve it with clear, concise goals. Sometimes you got to touch a Kirk, and the other times you got to touch a Picard, and sometimes Janeway. So it's you just really, and an occasional Cisco. You've really got to loop it all in, and then yeah. And sometimes people go, "Oh my gosh, but that's going to be so." I'm like, no. The hardest thing is to imagine, what if we don't do this? What happens to our data as a species? The first, the next tsunami, the next freeze in Texas, the next major fire in Strasbourg at a data center, the next act of war in cyber terrorism and cybercrime. What happens if we have another Library of Alexandria and we lose everything? We can't do that now. Software runs everything in our societies. It's no, right? An edge of network data centers. We're putting all these data centers where the people are down by the water's rising, right? We need someone to be able to operate outside of climate change, to fix climate change. There's so many reasons to do this. But the best thing is, Daniel, is customers. And that's who we're working with. And that is one of the greatest satisfactions in the world, is when you see a happy customer. When you've taken a pain point for someone else and relieved that pain. Tremendous. And we're building a new industry that way too. So that's Lone Star.
So inspiring and exciting. And the geeks, the space geeks?
Yeah, Geeks Without Frontiers. Well, they're Michael Potter. I'm just one of the co-founders, along with John Morris and Michael Potter, amazing gentleman who helped us found the Institute of Space Commerce, but also great award-winning director too, and producer, Orphans of Apollo and the University and many others. But the idea of Geeks Without Frontiers, it's to basically do the things that no one else wants to do. Sounds weird. To impact, our original goal was to positively impact the lives of 1 billion people in less than 10 years. We're past that now. And we go look at technological log jams, whether they be technical log jams. For example, we worked with the Tides Foundation, which later became Google.org, Nokia, RIM, Laptop per Child, Microsoft, Global Connect. And we put together the world's first 802.11s open source mesh network Wi-Fi protocols, IEEE certified. Say that 3 times. Right? And we're like going, oh my gosh, Chris, that sounds so boring. And yet it's in use by over 1 billion people around the world right now, giving clean, low power mesh network Wi-Fi. And it's like, oh my gosh, you mean you just facilitated a whole bunch of people coming online? We're like, yep, bingo. And then we did, the same kind of protocols we put in place with Dig Once. We did that with the FCC, who are amazing to work with the State Department, incredible to work with on this. We're doing the same thing with the World Bank. We've been working at the moment, with a whole bunch of looking at the tsunami of capacity that's coming out of satellite communications and helping countries actually, through charters, open up their regulatory environments. I mean, who looks at a regulatory environment as an issue that's something that's stopping economic change? We do. Right? And then we work on that. We work on model laws. We are working with World Vision right now, setting up a whole series of internet hotspots and collection points in Poland and Romania to help the refugee crisis, as we've done around the world. We don't normally talk much about what we do because we're busy doing it. but geekswf.org. Please join us. Please get involved. And we have immense fun with that. And as we do at the Institute of Space Commerce, where we just received an incredible gift from a donor of over $150,000 to actually advance our mission. And we're going to be looking for matching funds there. And that is change.space. That's our web address, change.space. Change.space. But change the equation. Help us change this Malthusian equation. Get involved. Study the economics of space. Learn about it. It's been going 60-something years now. There are a whole bunch of case studies. They're there for free. A couple of hundred papers, open source. They've been given at the National Science Foundation, at the White House, and many other places. Because people come to us and go, there's no way that'll work. And we're like, oh, watch us. Boom, works. And like, holy crap, how did you do that? We're like, bunch of smart people. Allow them to do what they're going to do. And then they just went and did it. And sometimes actions speak louder than words. And that is the Institute of Space Commerce, Geeks Without Frontiers, and Lonestar. You did ask.
Well, we'll just make sure that all the links are in the description. You're also on LinkedIn, and we'll get that link if people want to reach out to you.
Oh, please do.
Chris, it was an enlightening, it was an amazing conversation where I know, I want to be mindful of your time. We've already 50 minutes. I know we could just go on for hours and hours. Maybe that's what we're going to be doing. Maybe we'll do many of those conversations, because I think that you speak with a passion and with an optimistic energy that is not founded and rooted in naivete. Those are two total different perspectives. The naive, it's not about being naive. It's about believing that we can. And I think this is what really induced the space community. It's just this sense of accomplishment and driving forward, moving forward with acquired wisdom, rather than pointing the finger backward and trying to blame someone. So
exactly,
we need those conversations. We need that energy. We need to change that narrative that's out there that is just so doom and gloomy and just non-inspiring. Not that it wants to dismiss the challenges and problems that we need to fix, but just get off that and just victimization mindset and just, build something, do something with it. So Chris, thank you so very much. I can't wait to bring this out to the public. So
thank you, Daniel. Thank you, everyone, for putting up with me today. Do reach out to me on LinkedIn. I love doing that. Occasionally, they let me teach networking at ISU. So I always love doing this. Daniel, sincerely thank you for letting me ramble today, because I do have the ability to do so. A legend in my own mind. I find my own voice very soothing.
It's the best ramble. So. Thank you, Chris.
Well, thank you.